Cool. So this is awesome. I don't know if we need an hour. I don't know if we need 20 minutes. I have no idea, but so many people have asked. I've had people email me, say, can you do a 2-minute video to say, what's going to happen with change in these crazy times, being the expert on change. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, nobody knows. It's an unknowable unknown.
Yeah.
And it comes up in all the cohorts that I'm doing right now. It comes up in the public lean coffees. And you were on one of them. We talked about the same thing.
Yep.
So I thought what brought to mind was Saturday morning I did a lean coffee with a bunch of people in South America. So there's one of the facilitators down there is running a course, and I usually will join any of them for an hour just to chat. And we started talking about it, and the media likes to play the negative side of the picture no matter what. Right? They like to ask the binary questions. They like to trap people into giving answers that they know they can't give. And we spun the conversation around what is it that you guys are actually seeing in your communities? And the vibe was, it's almost like there's a return to community. The small village days when people who can help people, and it doesn't matter what race, what color, how old. Some people need help, give them help. Some people can offer help, and that could be anything from. One of the people said that there's, in their area where they live, there's a couple people that do the grocery runs because they can, and they want, some people need stuff delivered. They can't pay delivery fees, whatever. But people are getting more back to that human touch, right? I don't know if you guys have seen this on Zoom calls where you're talking about how things are going first instead of let's get to the agenda.
Right.
So I thought this would just be an awesome conversation because every time I talk to you guys, just things stick in my head that are just a different level of thinking. And I tell the stories so you might get some people from South America, Dawna, that will just email you out of the blue. I said, you should talk to, go to Insights to Action, Google that and check out Dawna. And I always tell the story, Colin, you told me when I was down there around when you were teaching. And the kid that came in and the teacher said, hey, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? And takes him out to get some food. And he tells you that if that kid comes to school hungry, his kid is coming to school hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are we at a state where people who could focus on more meaningful stuff can? And what's actually going to change? Right? Is it going to change our focus on everything is about economy and money? In big business, will that ever change? Do we need something more drastic where we'll actually start to focus on, economics? If you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, how much do they matter for real? Not the construct we've created of society that, well, I need money to buy food. Well, it never used to be that way. So I'm rambling. I'm just going to stop. And I already hit record. I don't know. I'll just stream this somewhere. But I thought it would be a really interesting conversation just to see, like, what do you guys actually see, and what might permanently change, and how could we take advantage of this to get back to stuff that matters?
Do you want me to start?
Please, yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
It's a nice, easy one.
Yeah. So, it's exciting. I mean, it is an easier one than one would think. And it's because when you go through an interruption of this nature, and I've been working on a webinar for weeks now on this, but we just decided to blend it with some music with a colleague of mine out of Italy. So we will get it done. But it very much explains what this opportunity is about. But we've been waiting for a chance to reconnect decision-making back to humanity, human-centered workplaces, to really opportunely designing the economy so it benefits more than shareholders and goes much further. And this is our time. I mean, you couldn't have a better interruption for seeing what the systems issues are. You couldn't have a better interruption for seeing what, without having a complete collapse of an ecosystem, we can see what the impact of humanity is on the planet, the air quality, the water quality, wildlife coming out now. back in taking over parks that they, they're presumably set up for them to live in, but they kind of retreated because 3 million people came to visit every year, and they sort of had to. So, this is an incredible opportunity for us to really think carefully about what do we want to design coming out of it. And that includes, great workplaces. That includes workplaces that are more in tune with not just, the natural inputs, like the old economic principles just completely ignored that. Now we can just sort of say, okay, you can't ignore it anymore, because if we don't get this right, climate change will put us to the next level test. So we're given a chance. It's kind of like, this is the systemic training. Somebody said, a friend of mine says, it's like a systems level crash course for pre-climate change, and that's the moment we're in. It's an extremely opportune time.
Mm.
Yeah. Just for kind of some context shaping, this is the third of these calls that I've been on today. It's all there, right? Like, it's such the conversation that we've been itching for people to need to consider. So the two kind of streams of thought that come to mind are, I read the founder of Patagonia's book, Let My People Go Surfing. And he talks all around sustainability and ethics, and not growth for growth's sake, but growth for the purpose of being able to do what you need to do and no further. Not that you need 7 of my jackets in your store or in your closet, but you need 1, and you need to bet that it was well made with thoughtful suppliers, and that if it gets a nick in it, you don't need to throw it away. We can give you a kit to patch it up. And that level of thinking is new for me. That level of thought around human agency, but then the moral ethics of where it lands, and then the other concept that I think will be in the forefront is triple bottom line. And it's how do we look at a opportunity from the viewpoint of like our people, the impact to the world, and I can't even think of what the third one was, or the citizen maybe. And it's like having that more like holistic view, because you realize how volatile the stock market is always, even if we want to believe that it's not.
Yeah, the interesting thing, and what came up on Saturday, was the tie-in to the purpose over profit. So that's when we started talking about all the stuff, Dawna, that you've been doing forever.
Feels like it.
That, I remember I talked with Paul Gibbons, who wrote The Science of Successful Organizational Change. And this was a few years ago. And I remember him saying, 10 years ago, we couldn't say VUCA, and we couldn't talk about vulnerability in the boardroom because you'd get laughed out for being a meh. Right? And now we're in a time where you can say that. Leaders can say, you know what, I'm not okay and I don't have the answer. They can ask for help. So the hard part for me is tying in the purpose over profit, but you need profit to pursue your purpose. The paradox of that cycle. In the context of a lot of the conversations I've been having is around more at the individual level, less at the system level, which is people being in this situation can now realize there's other ways that they can pursue profit by focusing on meaningful stuff. Like, they don't have to work for the 200-year-old financial institution company that they've never liked going into. They realize that the world is now their sandbox, where it used to be, well, what company is in my town? And I guess when I graduate, I'll go work there. And now they're like, well, wait a minute. I can work for a company in Sweden remotely. So is this a start of a more generational shift where people who are, who have kids right now are showing their kids that they don't have to go through that. You go through university, you get your degree, you get married, you have 2 kids, you buy a station wagon, you work at the tire factory for 50 years. Is there now the potential for people to think that there aren't limits anymore? There never were, but now is this an opportunity for people to realize that there's a lot more opportunity?
I mean, in my mind, there's no question about it. First of all, in the past, what we've done is focused on survival as a consumption activity. So I'll do whatever it takes to survive. We'll withdraw on the health of the planet in order to survive. We won't count those resources because we need to survive. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it 10,000 times. We just need to put the dinner on the table and in the short term, as opposed to thinking about anything with having any lasting longevity at all to it. So that's the first part. The second part is that the shift then is from surviving at any cost through consumption to survival using our co-creative talent. So it's a collective responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. We're really plugging in what we can all do better together by being creative instead of trying to wrestle things down. The purpose over profit. Ooh, try that again. The purpose over profit. I get so excited. So thank you. Conversation. It's sort of like it's a matter of focus. If you look at, oh gosh, I can hardly wait to meet that quarterly target. Yeah. Okay. Nice. But who's inspired by that? We don't get inspired until we're working on a goal that is way bigger than any one of us together. That's the power of purpose. It takes you to a whole new level of cooperation, a whole new level of inspiration. And you just can't get there by thinking, what are we going to do by June? Where are we now? May, end of May. What are we going to do by? No, you can't get there. So this is where if we think about the companies that have put purpose as their guiding principle, their beacon, they're way more profitable than the companies, unless they're completely unethical. But, they're way more profitable than the companies that are driven by profit, because profit is an extremely narrow band. And because you're not inspired to go after it, you're not tapping into a fraction of the talent that people have and can bring to the equation. But overso, when you put that, that massive transformational purpose up there, you bring out talent that people didn't know they had. It's a real radical jump, and I think that's the place we're in right now, is making that radical jump.
And that's where I see the humanizing component of it, right? It's no longer are we okay with having the leader of an organization or a country be the limiting factor of what's possible. And I think something that's not being discussed, at least in the States, is how global this pandemic really is, and how limited we are to our own capabilities, and the lack of depth and maybe relational rigor that exists between country lines that are man-made, and the opportunity that we leave untapped on the daily basis to solve bigger problems together. I think that co-created and shared purpose stuff still seems fluffy to folks who don't get it, but folks who don't get it will soon be watching those that just said, I'm not sure what it looks like, but here's my first step. And let's see if we can learn from that.
Yeah. And ignoring the peanut gallery too, because there's so much, today our government just announced another subsidy to help companies who can't pay employees. So whether they're working or not working, employees you can qualify for, I think, up to $875 a week to pay employees. And every few days to a week, there's a change to whatever that is, because they find, for example, some people who are they own their own companies and they don't pay themselves salary. they pay themselves via dividends. They didn't qualify under previous programs because the rule was your company must have a salary of X to Y. So of course, something trends on Twitter for 8 seconds. People get outraged about it, and then the next day the government goes, "Yeah, we missed this, so we're changing this." And the small business loan for Canadian small businesses was a great example of companies within this threshold will qualify for a $40,000 loan, interest-free for 2 years. If you pay it back in 2 years, $10,000 is forgiven. You apply through your bank. We're giving you the money. We'll sort out qualifications after the fact. So the process getting it up there, it was within 2 days. It was up, and at least on the form that my bank had on there, it was name, address, business number, click a checkbox if you agree to the terms, and done. And within 5 days, all the money is there for people, which is just incredible. And to bring it back to the peanut gallery, is everybody flocks to Twitter. The whole program is a sham because I didn't qualify. Well, you're one out of 500,000 businesses. It's just the decision making is we have enough to make a good enough decision for now, which would have been unheard of in the government before. It would have taken 18 months to create this type of program with all the committees and things like that. So I wonder if it's going to shift, be finally a trigger for basic universal income in Canada for one. But things like that, the power in the mob is bringing attention to issues, as toxic and horrid as it is to watch on social media sometimes. Is that what's bringing enough meaningful change? Sometimes, like it's almost like, the meaningful change happens after a horde of people complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that and I understand it. I guess there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is that we've been living by constraints for a long time. So we sort of assume that if we can't do something, we can't do it, when in reality, we can do a heck of a lot. And that's where the creative part comes out. We can transcend the adversity that we're faced with and achieve a whole lot more than we can if we whine and moan about it. I can also relate to, the people that sort of said, hey, I got missed, because as a single parent raising my daughter for the period of time from the time she was 1.5 years until she graduated, if I had a rough time, it was tough. There's no good luck. There's no help. And now she's in a place where she just lost her entire income for her entire summer. Like her whole season was gone. As a professional commercial photographer, it was gone. And so, but the government came through, and I thought, hallelujah, because there's a whole lot of assumptions that get made in these government programs about how people are making a living. Everything from freelancing to, gig or whatever it happens to be. If you have a regular job, get paid every 2 weeks, the last thing you understand is how anybody else is doing it, because you're confined by your own experience. So I think, this shift that we're seeing, this rapid response, is incredibly encouraging, because it's opening up the lens to sort of see how else people are doing this, how else people are not going to government programs, but are doing it on their own in some way, shape, or form. And now they need some help, and don't worry, they'll pay it back, because that's where they prefer to be. They don't prefer to be on programs until the end of time. And again, that goes back to the argument for UBI, I think, as well, universal basic income. So I kind of would like to see that come about as a result of that. I know that I've been on conversations where we've all been marveling at, my gosh, they did that in 7 days. It would have taken 7 years previously. So, that just shows, I think that shows the system what it's capable of when it doesn't sit in the pit of constraints 24/7. So I think there's a lot being learned right now, and it's pretty darn incredible.
Yeah. I love there's a Matthew Kelly quote, and he says, people see the world based off the street where they grew up on. And when I think about the future of humanity being more interconnected around the world, more capable of crossing what used to be divided, but now through technology instantaneously, I'm hopeful that a lot of, and then there was the book Factfulness, which kind of just stepped up and took a position that like our world is getting better. Although for the ones that it's not good for yet, it is still terrible. It is getting better. Because both of those positions are true, but it's not until someone is curious enough to know objectively or validate a position one way or the other that they can seek to understand. And there's no time before that that problems can truly be solved. If there's too many people that look like me that don't have bridges to people that don't, we won't be able to solve other people's problems with our biased perceptions of what someone else might be going through. And I think that is curiosity for me that is untapped. It's all middle class or above, or even like someone on the fringes of lower and middle class who is just now starting to understand the struggle of food scarcity or globally water scarcity because of COVID. It's like, no, that person has experienced this day to day, potentially for generations. Your eyes are now being opened. Be curious.
Yeah, it's like the Bill Gates special on Netflix when he talks about redesigning the toilet. So he reads an article about how mortality rates from diarrhea, and he's like, how can this possibly be a problem? And he just starts to go look at it, and it's sanitation. You know, what we take for granted of just having pipes, they do not have. And it was what, a six-year journey, cost him I want to say a couple million of his own money. And it took 6 years because, I mean, he's Bill Gates and still nobody cared. Like trying to get investors or trying to get people to fund this thing and build these things and bringing in universities. And they're like, well, there's no money in it. We're not going to bother. And, you know, it took Bill Gates that long and it was that hard to solve a simple problem. It has to open the eyes of the right people. So, you know, there's things that individuals can do, you know, speaking of middle class, like we're a middle class family. What can we do? Well, we donate to as many charities as possible, and usually global ones. Not so much things that are local in my town, because my town is not really a town that it's an upper class area of Canada, I guess. So people who want to make a difference, you know, where are their options of helping and supporting?
You know, that's a great question. And I love what your family's doing, because that's a really good example of a great way to do it. It's just start small, you know. So I guess it depends on what the scope of your thinking is. You know, starting small, like it's in the powers in the numbers. And I'm right now kind of doing what I can to wire people in my network together who in a particular nation can restart the economy by doing things differently, by using this moment to co-create a completely different response. So when we go back to work, or when the business is coming down, like failing because of COVID, instead of doing that, you say, well, let's completely rethink what we're doing things and come out of it a different way. So that's where people who are employed by companies can go in and say, well, we're not going to, we've had a taste of autonomy. We've had our taste of connecting with our family and the things, values and things that matter to us. And we've seen whether or not, depending on the company, you care about us as commodities, just as widgets that you've got running through the system, or whether you actually do care. And that's going to determine everything. So if you're with a company that doesn't care, you don't have to work for them. You've got the chance to go and create and work with companies that actually do care, because the ones that don't won't last. That is the both the beauty and the adapt or die part of this interruption. It sort of says we're here to adapt. If you can't do it, then there you go. I mean, that is and that's true for us as a species as well. We have not been adapting. This is why I started doing what I was doing. And thank you for seeing that, Jason, 20 years ago. And you're just looking at it going, wow, we are so slow to figure this out. So here we have a chance to speed up the speed. And whether it's just doing what people are doing, going out and shopping for other people. I just see really nifty things happening where people who would not normally have sat down around the end of the driveway to have a socially or a physically distant social. That's happening, and that didn't happen before. So, I mean, these are all small things, but they all add up to a lot of compassion in the end.
Yeah, I've talked a lot on these types of calls and with colleagues and friends around. If my kids have kids, that's the generation when we're going to see the output or the outcome of what's happening right now. And it goes back to I'm sure we've had parents that were around in war times, right? Like my grandparents, my grandma was a hoarder because she fled Germany. So she knew what it was like to have nothing. So, and we'd always, like, we're a very jokey family. So, she'd have Sprite from that expired 12 years ago that's still sitting in the pantry. And it was always full and it was always stocked. And that generation grew up with, you need to keep everything stocked. You need to have a good plan to go to a good school, to get a good job, so you're not in the situation where I was in. And then now for us, what is the thing that's going to pass on, that our kids are going to pass on, that eventually you're going to see these generational swings. You see it with every different generation. They've got their own view of reality and their own way of thinking about things. You can see it shifting now with the shift away from the typical go to university for 4 years, get a degree, get a job. The gig economy is very, very real. So lots of kids are growing up with that. I like to draw. I can just work in my basement and I can draw this for movies or for TV, or I can do these and do that and the other. So, it's just interesting to see how it's going to be generations before we see an effect of what we're in right now, of what positive impact it's actually made for people.
I don't know that it's going to take that long. And I don't know that it will take that long, because I think things are moving a lot faster than people realize. I mean, we had this wake-up call has been on the horizon for, I was thinking back, I mean, I was facilitating these conversations in the early 90s, and it was on the wall then. In 2010, I remember publishing a podcast called Adapt or Die, and there was some kickback on it because it's not that dramatic. Well, now it's a lot closer to being that dramatic, and it's only 10 years away. So I think we're going to see them a lot closer, closer in reality. But I also think we have to, because we are not going to be adaptable unless we realize that it's going to be a higher level of care, a higher level of respect for everyone, for all species on this planet, not just the dominant one that has really been acting quite recklessly and irresponsibly, but also for every single species. I mean, many of these viruses come out of an environment where the species has not been respected at all. We have the indigenous people in the Amazon who are being considered to be disposable in order to get I mean, that's got to go. That's just not okay. And so I think there's places where ethically and morally there's been that intuition, that understanding that, this can't go on. And now we get a chance to actually do something about that and change the trajectory finally, which is, yes. So, I mean, as interruptions go, we're lucky. We're really lucky.
The two concepts that kind of flushed out there, like my dad used to say, adversity doesn't make people good or bad, it just makes them more what they already are. And when you start to analyze that concept around adaptability or agility, instances like these are a catalyst to expose a bunch of fake hustle, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work quick, and folks are like, hey, your values or that vision or that mission that you kind of map as a facade or pull wool over people's eyes, when the tough times hit, we know what happened. And like we've talked about, like now we have the question of how did you treat your people during this global pandemic? And then I think the last one there that I see just being adjacent to so many things is ethics. It's like I just continue to hear murmurings of like the high levels, but on adjacent playing fields where you didn't used to hear it, of what are the ethics around this from a like moral standpoint, from a environmental standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, and those are conversations that are stumbling into places where it didn't used to have to exist.
Mm-hmm. You know, I appreciate you raising that, because when I wrote Decision Making for Dummies, I was researching all these definitions of ethics and moral, you know, and how that gets all tangled up. And I finally came across something that said, do no harm. I thought, well, that's about as simple as it gets. And if you ask that question, you know, systemically, you know, if I do this, will this go into the water stream? Will this, you know, if I think about it at the widest scope level, not just in terms of impact on humanity, but impact on biodiversity and all things, then you've got an ethical principle to apply to all decision making in companies and in life for that matter. It's such a simple thing, and yet it's not been applied. Mm-hmm. So we've got that chance to fix that.
The leader at, was it GE, that said she took like a 30-page PDF for dress code and put dress appropriately.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not more than that. Because if you show up as such, and we are deeply rooted in what we believe and the mission that we hold, we will be able to go peer to peer with accountability. And that's the most productive way of doing life. It's not like, well, in policy 76C, it's like, I don't give a shit about policy 76BA to your like addendum. It like I didn't write it. Like I don't know how it came about. Like I don't know who approved it.
It's when the edge case turns into a rule. So one of my favorite stand-up comedians likes to say, we have to keep society moving at the pace of its slowest citizen just to keep things from not falling apart, right? It's like, why do we have speed limits? Well, because some jackass drove too fast and crashed into a family, and now we have to drive 20 kilometers an hour. So, and it's that in organizations. I mean, how many times have you seen gates and processes and rules put in place because of edge cases? And that's our natural, something brought me pain as a manager or a leader or a protector of the production environment. Something brought me pain that I don't want to have happen again. Therefore, I clamped down. I did this once too. I was actually on a call with a client. This was probably 15, 17 years ago or so. I was doing a demo of our system on our demo site with a client, you know, like World Wrestling Entertainment, like a big fucking client. And the demo site goes down because one of the developers just decided to restart it. And I was, of course, I look like an idiot. So out goes the email. All right, that's it. Lock it out. I don't want any, right? Which was just stupid. I didn't even bother to take the time to talk with anyone or listen to see how it happened. I mean, I was only like 24 at the time. Who the hell makes a 24-year-old a director in a, right? It's just so it wasn't my fault. It was their fault. But still, there's
like, what were they thinking?
It's just that the edge case becomes the rule. We want to have a rule in place for every, because the edge cases are the hardest ones to deal with. Because it's something that's unknown, it's foreign, we're not used to seeing this happen. And we have to put a rule in place to prevent it instead of just assume good intent, going back to the do no harm. It means there wasn't an enabling constraint or there wasn't a conversation that prevented this from happening. I like the Etsy story. I don't think Etsy is like that anymore. People follow the Etsy story to the 3-armed sweater where the developer took production down because he deployed something that was very, very simple and actually took production down, and they gave him the 3-armed sweater award. To say, thank you for finding something so stupid that we should have prevented. Whereas most companies, they punish. Um,
Wow.
and that's a hard thing to switch away to jump into that mentality.
And we're also seeing this in big companies now, because we've got the people working remotely, and so the question is, okay. And so one of my colleagues asked a question: if they're working remotely and they're not performing, what will you do? Will you go and ask those questions, or will you pull them in and keep an eye on them?
Right.
And of course, that's a good question to ask, because it's the answer tells you where's the mind. Is it still on controlling people and treating them like kids? Or have they graduated to full-on adults where they can make decisions and actually, be treated like grown-ups?
Right.
I think those are the fundamental questions we've got in front of us now inside companies in every country. When we've got some outliers that are way ahead on that, self-managed companies and so forth, but we have way more that are still running organizations based on the parents are sitting at the top. The parents are sitting at the top. And the rest are kids and need to be controlled.
Yeah, the return to goals. If it takes you an hour to accomplish the weekly goal, awesome. If it takes you 20 hours, awesome. A goal is a goal is a goal. If you can figure out how to do it faster, great.
Yeah.
Instead of, if I don't see you, you're not working. Right.
Yeah, and we did see some of that in this. Going back to something you said earlier, Colin. But what's the legacy? When one of my colleagues said to me, like, when you think back on it, if you ask the question, if your kid sort of said to you, what was your legacy? Did you, say, oh, well, I fired all my employees the second day in. That great. That's your legacy. So again, these are really important questions to be asking in this wonderfully reflective time. But it's also a time where, out of this reflection, comes a completely different direction of an emergence, if you will, of way better things, if that's what we choose to go for. So, it is that, but it is that space of just saying, that was a gut level decision. I wasn't thinking, I just was scared, and I made that decision. And that's how those decisions show up. So you can be assured there was nothing reflective or co-creative about that at all. So, it is that place where, if you're in those positions of making those big decisions, you get to ask yourself, what do I really stand for here? And dig a little deeper.
That connects a dot for me to, I wonder, the system kind of thought process is so exhilarating and so curious, and it also takes it away from you individually, so it's easier to play with, but the purpose of the individual, if that purpose is so deeply understood, which I can only start to appreciate probably 2 years ago, when I had someone kind of say to me, hey, job title aside, this appears to be what you're going after, co-creating with others to build people first stuff that leaves a lot an impact greater than self. And sometimes that takes some rather significant seasons of adversity, I think, which we can relate to differently. But the phraseology that I always land back on is the difference between eulogy versus resume virtues. And it's is the crowd going to be wondering where the hell that person came from when someone's trying to mask over what you're supposed to say at the end? Or is it going to be so dead hard clear that there's going to be joy and significance whenever that time comes? And I don't believe too many people can answer that question confidently, focused on the resume. Although when the pressure in the system heats up, you better believe that decisions are made otherwise. But on a completely human level, if folks were to, if they have the luxury of thinking, right? I think that we started there in the conversation. If they have the luxury of thinking about what they might be able to do, that would be worth considering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Very cool. I I don't know what to say next. I don't know if that's a good natural wrap up. Um, but
It's a good question that, in terms of the retrospective, Colin. And I guess when I think about the youth coming up, going back to even Jason, your kids, for example, the other question is what can we do if we put all this creative intelligence together and really apply ourselves to these big issues that have been, blocking us for like, the big global risk, of course, climate change being right at the top,
mm-hmm.
because now we're past mitigation, we're past prevention. That's what we lost that window a while ago. The best we can do is mitigation and preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the opportunity becomes, well, how do we both mitigate and prepare? And how do we, and again, it really means, what are we, in terms of collective responsibility, where can we start? And so I love the work that's been done on plastics. That's a great start, but there's so much more that we can do. And going back to the question you asked earlier, Jason, about where to begin, it can be in the simplest of things. It's, it's just, how do I look after other species instead of assuming that I'm the only species on the planet that deserves to exist? What are the things we can do in our own home that look after, have more greater respect for things coming in, just that exchange of energy, that exchange of whatever, is coming in. So I think, this is a real important time for really working with every single, like right across the board, and, working with the diversity that we have, to seeing how we can use that to as I said, been saying, it's how you put all the pixels of the picture into the, into full frame. So instead of just having little pieces of it, put it all together. And I think that's what's exciting about where we're at right now in terms of what next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It reminded me of the metaphor that I've been using for a while of, change people being the white space workers, or being the switchboard operators, the air traffic controllers, and finding that, at least finding my groove in that space, which is, I can probably help you with whatever your problem is with change, but there's a very, very good chance that I can point you to somebody who can. And which was the idea around, what you just mentioned, Dawna, gave me an idea of something that shows people they have more choice than they might think of.
Right.
So I'm just a developer on a team, and I build software for a bank, and I would really love to manage or create a community garden in my town. But I don't know how to do that. So how to, help and show people and point them towards things that they could look at to follow what it is that they want to do. I've had the last couple of calls over the last 2 weeks. Two people have emailed me separately that whenever things go back to normal, which might be a next topic for us, which it never will, obviously, but yeah, I think I'm going to be looking for some new scenery. So that it's just made them stop and think, why am I here doing what it is that I'm doing? Is there something different I could be doing? Which is awesome. And maybe I'll save the normalcy one for another chat, because there's so much. It's yeah, the connecting of the dots is all around the waves of how things go. And when this thing first hit, boom, everybody's an expert in remote working. So every social feed is 5 steps to working at home. I'm like, turn your fucking computer on and sit in front of it like you do. That's it. There's no how-to. You just do the same shit. You're just in your house in your underwear. And then, have you noticed that's gone away?
Yeah.
And now what's the trend?
Thankfully.
Well, wait a minute. Why are we locked down? It's the government. They're trying to keep us down.
blame.
So we're going through this natural cycle of how people process these things that they can't possibly know. So, you've seen the conspiracy theories. We're being locked away so the government can control us. I'm like, do you think this is fun for the government? Every government's economy is down the toilet. All their, they have to worry about keeping the perception of order. They know they can't keep order, but they can't make it look like they're not trying to keep order by putting these things in places. So we're all going through these waves, and whatever the change is, whether it's using a new software tool or whatever it is, there's a new normal. I see a lot of this in Agile, Dawna. You probably see the same thing. Well, the company I'm working with, they went back on the old habits. No, they didn't. They elevated to a new status quo that wasn't what you thought they could have got to, but it's somewhere new now. And then the next time they're somewhere new again. So we never go back to the normal. There's just a new status quo. And now people don't seem to care as much about working at home as when it originally hit. It was new, it was shiny, and now it's just the norm. We went back to the old way of still working. We're just doing it in a different spot. So, maybe I don't know if we want to keep this conversation going or do another one around what people asking about when will things return to normal and what will that look like. You guys have any thoughts about that?
The simple one from my point of view is if we're really going to evolve, then we need to move things to a higher order. That is the way nature does it. Single-celled organisms to a human with 50 billion cells, that's the evolution. Not just that, but the entire biodiversity reflects the evolution of nature, of life on the planet and how it worked. This is no different. This is just us sort of deciding, what do we want to do next? Do we want to implode, or do we want to actually evolve? And if we choose to evolve, then it will always move to a higher order, as long as we make that choice to do so. If we decide we want to destroy ourselves, then, as we've, Yemen, and we've got lots of good examples out there of where we've decided just destruction was the better idea, then that's an option too. So it's up to us. It's up to us as to what we do next. And I know the next time we have a conversation, I'm really hoping to be able to report on some things that are going on now that are, toward using this moment to reinvent how we do things, but reinvent it intentionally, like step into that intention of just saying, we've got this now, let's use it. Let's use this time to reconnect some really important things so that they have meaning. And that's a conversation I'm looking forward to having, because I don't think, the other part of it is I really hope when we do that, it's in such a fun and creative way. They don't get these little incremental things because we don't have time for that anymore. We get radical jumps because we're capable of it. We just have doubted that capacity. And, now we can leave that constraint behind and start making things happen.
That's amazing. My mind kind of takes me to, although there's been chaos and noise and people kind of bouncing from this list of 5 to this list of 5, I've been guilty internally. What you also can start to decipher, and what leads people toward pulling trust, is those that found stability or an anchor before this season so that they could be stable for others through this season. And what I'm most fascinated by is this concept that joy was never available without a struggle, ever. Like, there was no transformative experience that ever existed without a season leading there up to, which made that last moment so special. But our instant gratification, maybe global culture, believes that when you make it into the spotlight, that's what we adhere to, as opposed to what makes that spotlight so special. It would be insignificant without this season of relentless perseverance and growth. Like, if it's a higher order, like, that means there were steps along or setbacks along the way that allowed for that higher order to be appreciated. And I think that's the problem when folks try to retool or implement something for an incremental advantage. When folks didn't believe in it, they allowed their higher order to be like just enough because they didn't believe in what you were aspiring to or the struggle that it would take to get there. And that was known at the beginning. Our group just didn't ask the right set of questions to validate where their positioning was or what that group of people or country may have needed to discover for themselves.
That's awesome. So that's a very good bookend for this conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yes, we will definitely have to do this again.
I'd love
Jason,
to.
yeah, thanks for pulling this together. What a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.